Well, thank you all very much for joining us. This is an incredibly important Zoom conference that we're doing because Abadia Retuerta has such an extraordinary history. And we're very privileged to have Alvaro Perez, who's been with the winery for 22 years in various capacities, and is currently the Terroir Academy director, which is the director of Terroir. And I do hope I pronounced that correctly because my Spanish is not that eloquent.
Perfect.
It will be a very lengthy and very in-depth insight and look into what makes Abadia Retuerta so special and unique, and will give us great insight as to how we can take this extraordinary property to market. So Javier Rosas, who is the commercial director, and Pablo Perez, who is the commercial director for the United States, are with us as well. So thank you, gentlemen. It's good to see you. And Alvaro, please look forward to the next 90 minutes with you.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to share the presentation to make it easier to understand, as we are apart from each other. Okay, thank you. There's an overview of the beautiful place, and the old monks in the 12th century have been there growing vines and so on. And I proudly can say that after many years of work, probably today, it is the most splendorous times for this abbey and these surroundings, I think, which is what we have been told to do with the place and with the location. You know where we are. We are very close to the Ribera del Duero. We are obviously in Spain, in the northwest Spain, like 2 hours driving west from Madrid, and it is right here, close to the city of Valladolid, and in the middle of the Duero Valley. In Castilla-León, our region, there's 5 other DOs: Bierzo, Tierra de León, Toro, Rueda, probably the most representative, and obviously Ribera del Duero, which is the most famous. We are right outside the Ribera del Duero. We are kind of broadly connected, but we are not inside the appellation, and we talk about that. There's even a little touch of Rioja that it gets included in Castilla-León, but very, very small. So the hierarchy of the appellation of origin in Spain, real quick, it is at the top of the pyramid is Vino de Pago. Why am I saying this is because we applied to be recognized as Vino de Pago, because today we are Vino de la Tierra, which is right underneath in the 5th place. We were Vino de Mesa when we started back in the 90s, because we were outside the appellation, and it was quite difficult because with this law you're not allowed to use varieties on the label or vintage on the label. Luckily, we fought about getting that right, and we get it right. And since 2003, we became Vino de la Tierra, but that's for the whole region. So since we are a little bit of a single place with some certain microclimate, we applied for Vino de Pago, and the law of Vino de Pago is like it has been written for us, because you need to have more than 5 years of good critics, good recognitions, and certain kind of a specific microclimate, and the winery has to be within the boundaries of the Pago. So we met all the requirements, and we have been approved already for the Minister of Spain, and it's been sent up to Brussels, to European Union, to get the official recognition, and we are just waiting for this. So we're going to become Vino de Pago very soon. And a little thing about the Vino de Pago is that confusion about one thing is the Vino de Pago appellation, which only, I think, is 17 or 18 Vino de Pago small regions in Spain already. Some given to one specific owner, which is what we will get in the future, and some have several owners inside. but it is always a small portion of terrain. And then you will see that there's many wines that has the brand containing the word Pago on it, like our Pago Valdebellón or Pago Negralada. We have the right to use those because we registered these brands before the law came up in 2005. So this is why you find some Pago brands that are not inside any DO Pago. And to make it even more confusing, it is the Grandes Pagos de España Association, out of which we are members. And this is another thing. It's a private association that is like the German association VDP. It's like we are 30 wineries that just work with the spirit of terroir-based wines. Okay, in the 12th century is when the monks arrived there, and they had to leave in mid-19th century because of this law that took the goods from the church and gave it to private owners. Since then, the abbey and surroundings sort of went down because it was the monks with their austerity and their work was keeping up the property and the building very well. Despite all that, in 1931, it was declared a National Heritage Site, and we arrived here in 1988. So we're sort of we cannot say new, but renewed winery. It was this man, Pascal Delbecq, who was hired and made a huge terroir research, or soils research, that determined that there was a huge potential to make great wines, which is what our company wanted. And we decided to plant vines in 1991. Why plant new wines? Because everything was sort of uprooted, because in the 70s, there was some money given for uprooting your vines and put some cereal and some other, because it was a little bit after the civil war in Spain, a little bit of hunger, and it was a more difficult time. So there were different purposes for the land. Anyway, we replanted everything at the beginning with the same proportion as the varietals that are allowed in the Ribera del Duero. This is mostly Tempranillo, but a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot, which were the varietals that were authorized in the appellation Ribera del Duero, because our idea obviously was to get in. We were kindly told we will not be able to, they will not be able to open the doors on that side because they had to open the doors from all of the different boundaries and so on. So it was sort of a difficult times, because with no appellation, it was difficult in Spain and also outside of Spain to sell our wines. Something happened with the first vintage now, that it was selected because we had some connections in the US already, and we were selected by Robert Parker, who made the first flight of wines of Spain to be rated, and we were among those, and we had fantastic ratings, and that opened the doors for our brands especially to the export markets. We used to sell like 80% of the wines outside, because in Spain, like I said, without not being Rioja or Ribera del Duero, it was quite difficult. So we, apart from this Robert Parker, we had some, since we were not allowed to be inside the appellation, we had to build our own marketing strategy, which the good thing is that it gave us freedom to do whatever we felt to do, not according to some strict regulations that sometimes we don't understand from certain appellations. So we had several prices, and we started to build the brand little by little. And in 2007, we discovered also Prephyloxera tempranillo, which is part of our research and studies. We will talk later about that. That probably is some of the tempranillo that the monks used to grow. And then the project of the winery was succeeding, and our owners decided to invest in the beautiful 12th century monastery to create a beautiful domain, five-star hotel, and we got our Michelin star in 2014. And here we are. This is some of the documents that we found in the Abbey. This is there's a lot of historical documentation. This is a map from 1887. Here's the Abbey with the Duero River giving a big curve surrounding the Abbey. This is why this place is called Retuerta, coming from Latin ribola torta. Ribola meaning river, and torta is like tortuous or curvy riverbank. Here is where the monks used to grow their vines, and there was some in this area where we found the Prephyloxera tempranillo that we are quite excited about because the profile is fantastic, and obviously it is survival vine that had on its shoulders all the droughts, all the fogs, all the cold, all the frost, and all the diseases, and it made it up, and it's fantastic the sort of the genetics now that we have with this varietal. It is 700 hectares of property. It's incredibly beautiful. It is true that it's a little bit harsh during the winter because the climate is extreme, but we have done we care a lot of the nature, and we replanted 65,000 pine trees. We use the wastewater for irrigation, and we also grow our own pine nuts and honey like the monks used to do. We preserve the local animal life, and also we do like use the biodiversity to help us work. There's even several singular trees in the property that are cataloged for Spain, and there's people only traveling to see this. This is how we like to work in the vineyard with natural grass when there's some rainy springs like this year, and this is how we sort of use the birds to help us. There's some nest, over 150 for the small Carbonero and Herrerillo birds that they eat insects like incredibly like hell. They help to manage and you know balance everything. And also we put some posts with some nests also for small birds of prey like this. That really, we took them there when they were only 20 or 30 days, so they felt like at home. And they stay here on the top of the post watching, and this allows that all of the birds that eat the grapes, they stay in the forest instead of going out to the vineyard and risk their lives. So quite fascinating working there. This is why I'm 22 years already there, and I hope many more. And let's talk about the terroir that we sometimes translate into terruño, the word terruño. And we're in the heart of the Douro Valley. What is different, what is unique in our property? It is this narrow valley, because the Douro River create this, it was huge millions of years ago, and sort of eroded the valley. Now became very little, the river. And there's several shapes in the valley. In the Ribera del Duero, there's some that are really wide open. Temperatures inside the valley there are higher, but in this case, in Abadia, it is the cold air coming from the Castilian plateau that falls down by gravity, and it stays in the lower part of the valley and it stratifies there. And just the same, the hotter temperatures are in what is called the thermal belt, which is in the middle of the slope. And this is, we are in an altitude ranging from 700 to almost 910 meters, so quite high, with limited rainfall, okay? And you know, the characteristics of what would be the extreme continental climate with the day-night temperature variation. This is how the soils are like, basically gravel and stony and sand on the lower end because of the sedimentation of the river, which is right here. And then as we go up the slope, we find the mother rock closer to the surface and sort of not as deep soil. And this mother rock sort of disintegrates itself into a fine lime that we call in a place in the area, it's called greda, with a good capacity of water retention, which is very important to go over the summers. There's also some erosion of the slope that took the soils from up the slope and blended it together with the sedimentation of the river. The result is a huge diversity of soils in the property, which is basically the great potential of the place. Also to stand out that apart from the cold air that comes in, it is all the vineyards are planted in the north-facing slope. So I would say Ribera del Duero is one of the regions that are better prepared to fight the global warming, the climate change. But even Abadia Retuerta is probably one of the coolest places of the area because of this. Even though that we are way downstream the Duero River, supposedly not to be that like that.
Alvaro, I have a quick question. Do you have concerns about frost because of where you are situated in the valley?
Definitely, and this has been a problem lately. I mean, it's more often a problem because what we have been measuring is that temperatures are going high. So usually we used to have bud break in the middle of May, quite late. But this has been getting earlier and earlier, and this is increasing the risk because we can have some frost even until the end of May because of the altitude. So we can consider now that we're getting frost 1 out of 3 or 4 years, not only in the spring, but also before harvesting. So, for example, 2007, we have a frost in September 20. 2008, we have a frost in September 28. So at the end, what we call in agronomy, the period free of frost is quite narrow in our place. So what we need is, as soon as the bud breaks, we need temperature and a good source of water during the summer to let go everything quick to finish maturation. So this is a huge limiting factor in our place. So I have to say that now the temperatures are going up. It has been good for us to really better finish maturation almost 8 out of the last 10 vintages. Okay, so it's been even good for us. Okay, how do we work? We work like we call ourselves Pago classification or plot by plot. Pago meaning like a small piece of land with certain characteristics that make them singular. And this is what we made the survey, and we divide the whole property in 54 plots or Pagos, attending to number 1, type of soil, number 2, different variety planted, and number 3, whether is close to the river at the lower part of the valley or up the slope, where we get more heat, warmest plots. So what we have been doing is working, observing, understanding what I like to call microviticulture, because we work side by side, less than 3 hectares each plot, and there's not a recipe for everything. It is what we have been observing, and we do different pruning, different management, and on every site. Then we harvest every Pago, and then we vinify also plot by plot, like they do now in Vega Sicilia also. So After malolactic fermentation, what we do is taste all of the wines. Let's say we have 54 wines, and then we decide what to do with the wines in terms of blending into Selección Especial, or fresh wine. We'll talk about that later, or making our single vineyard pagos, okay? Now we have several other varietals, and we will talk about that later, because of the climate change, we feel that we may need to think on changing something, basically to ensure the future of the Abadia Retuerta wines, okay? Like I said, the property is impressive, and the only thing that is anachronic in this beautiful picture, it would be the anti-frost tower. But this is vineyards, pine trees, and a 12th century abbey, like 8 centuries ago. In the winery, we work by gravity. I'm not going to go in detail in here, but we build the winery from scratch on the slope to allow to have the barrels on the knee ground level, like the monks used to age the wines in the lower part of the abbey. And gravity is used, to be more gentle with the natural processes, but also in an homage for the way the monks used to make wines. So, they didn't have any pumps, so this is what we're doing now. This is where we age our white wine. This is something particular of our winery, and some of the good things of being outside of the appellation Ribera del Duero, and we are allowed to do wines like this. And this is how it works the gravity with some cranes that we take the wines from one place to another, and then use gravity to release, to do the blendings, and also to put the wines into the barrel. And also we do the rackions in the barrels by gravity with a system developed by Pascal Delbecq. And here's Pascal, Angel, our winemaker, and Enrique Valero, our managing director, that took over in 2009, and made the property and the company a little bit more, I would say, professional with the marketing stuff. Okay, wines. Before we go into the wines, I like to describe what we are looking in terms of the style of our wines. We like to say that we are terroir-based wines. We do pago by pago viticulture vinification, and this is the way to learn, because we do like maturation controls, and then according to those controls and all the historical data that we have from every site, because of this learning and understanding, we decide when to pick, and then we use the data from the maturation controls to work during fermentation, because the vintages are different, obviously. And then we get the analysis from the wine, and also the tasting of the wine from the different plots to work next year, trying to fix whatever needs to be fixed. I like to say now that today we're drinking the wines that we were dreaming, the technical team were dreaming of 25 years ago. And for example, this Selección Especial 2016 now is fantastic, it's working beautifully. And I would like to be like 5 years older to really see how it develops, because it has much more materia and potential to develop than the previous wines that are already showing beautifully. We respect the terroir and the varietal in its particular site. This is what we do with the Pago wines. We try to do minimal intervention with natural processes. We are working now on organic. We're not certified, but this is how we work. This is one of the good things also about the global warming and having less rains during the growing cycle. Obsessed about ripeness, and this is what we understand about quality. And we look for obviously for the skin ripeness and the harmony or the balance. We're not looking for the extra alcohol or extra extraction. We just try to do this little bit of a harmony that I think is working very well. Also obsessed about quality control and microorganism. And these days of the lockdown, we have been having some calls from people that they open wines, they keep them in the fridge, and our wines keep well 5, even 7 days, as opposed to some other wines that they're drinking. Not obsessed about the wood. We use barrel only for aging, but we are basically wine makers. We use new oak and used oak, both. And it's funny when now the journalists come to the winery, and those that were saying that the good thing was the 200% new barrel, now they tell you that you should use used barrels. It's funny to hear them, but we're keeping a little bit our way. Always have a look into the market and to the trends. And then what we do is we don't go like from down here to up here, from 200% new to now 100% use. But we a little bit go with the wave, but keeping our style. This is how we want to do it. And I will send you this presentation later, because we found a couple of places that talks about what is a fine wine, particularly Jancis Robinson, this English master of wine, that defines the wine like the way we think they should be like, and also Pauline Bicard. I will hand this, but it's basically what we have been discussing today. Okay, wines. We have 6 wines in the portfolio. We have 1 white. We have Selección Especial, which would be like one category, which is a blend. And then we have 4 top of the range single vineyard Pago wines, limited production. Okay. Okay, the Abadia Retuerta Le Domaine Blanco de Guarda. Blanco de Guarda meaning like it's a white wine that you can keep many years in the bottle. It is an altitude white wine, and it is difficult to find white varietals planted this way upstream the Douro. And now it is being recovered a little bit, the Albillo Mayor, which is a native varietal that needed more heat to really do well. And now it's been recovered a little bit because of this trend also of recovering the native varietals back. But there's not many wineries that have white varietals planted in the Ribera del Duero, and there's some that have white wines, but they source and make the wines in Bierzo, Galicia, in some other places. So how we decide to do this is because by accident we found in one of our plots that it was planted by Merlot in the lower part of the valley, gravel. Some white, after 3 or 4 years, we saw that there was a few vines that were not Merlot because they were white varietals, and we called the nursery, told them, what is going on? Something is wrong, this is not Merlot. They gave us some kind of excuses, and I said, okay, we're gonna keep this. There was like over 1,000 plants in a 9-hectare Pago, scattered, so it was kind of difficult to work, but we decided in a way, with our spirit of innovation and research, and also in a way to have fun and do some new things. In '98, we started to pick these white varietals before the reds, and then we started to produce 1, maybe 2 barrels every vintage, which we were showing or putting in front of our importers, friends, journalists, and they were kind of shocked because they were not expecting a white wine in the land of red wine. And they were quite surprised about the quality. Also, we tried several, trials or pilots to do different things with the white varietals. At the end, we decided to upgrade this experimental wine to our portfolio, and we decided to uproot these varietals, white varietals that came to us from heaven, because we didn't ask for this, and at the same time that this Merlot in the lower part was not really working any good. So we uprooted, we grafted, we took advantage of the roots from the Merlot vines, and we grafted these white varietals that were, we didn't know what it was. We now with the DNA, we found that it was mostly Sauvignon Blanc. And then we add some Verdejo and some Godello to add a little bit of a national Spanish touch to our white. And this is what we produce now. It is barrel fermented white, because when we had so small volume of whites, the small container that we had, it was a barrel, and we kept the style that we had been doing since the 98 in that way. Basically, it's 20% new and the rest is used by the same wine, from several years ago. And it is a wine that really flies away, and it is not a cheap wine, but it is really quite recognized and usually stays 3-4 months in the winery. Let's see this year, because this is difficult times now. The thing is that I think it's been drunk a little bit earlier than we would like to, but it's up to you to keep it at home. And then the Selección Especial, which is our most renowned wine, and obviously it is the wine that everyone knows, because it has accounts for 90% of our volume, also almost 85% of the volume. So at the end, volume gives you capillarity in all markets. So this is the brand that is most seen, and obviously it is also has built its reputation onto what I like to call consistent quality, which is not consistent in a horizontal way. It's consistent with a small leaning toes up, because of this experience that we're getting in producing the wines better and better. At the end, when we taste the wines after malolactic fermentation from the different pagos, we select those that are going to keep, number one, the style of Selección Especial, and number two, there are the better aging potential to be blended into this wine. The blend is different every year with a majority Tempranillo, and has had many recognitions and prizes. It is known as the wine that never fails. So this is one of our success, and Pascal always told us, don't you worry about the 100 points. For me, it is more interesting to see that you are having 92, 93, 94 for this wine for 10 years in a row than really one single vintage with 100 points. And this is, I think, what is bringing success to this brand and this wine. And then the Pago wines, which is basically how we monitor, how we study a perfect match between varietal and soil in the terroir, and the Abadia Retuerta terroir. So Pago Garduña is not the thing that worried us, because it's sort of a northernly varietal. In the summers of Castile, it could be struggling, and we were seeing that some of the Syrahs planted in the Mediterranean side were a little bit raciny and not the style that we liked. So we decided to use not only the north-facing slope, but a little pago that sort of leans towards east at the same time. So only the gentle sun from the morning hits the vines, and we avoid the heavy sun from the afternoon. And we are getting a very interesting Syrah. We brought in several different clones because we wanted to add diversity. I remember they were quite different at the beginning. We were harvesting, it's only 2 hectare plot, and it was a special wine, so we harvested little by little, even in few days, different days. And today, what we have seen is that now the adaptation of this, the mutation of these vineyards from Shiraz, we're getting the harvest days only into one single day. Huh? So now they ripe all at a time, and we can say now this is the Shiraz. I don't like to call it Shiraz. This is our Pago Garduña, because it's the behavior of Shiraz in this particular place. And then Pago Valdebellón, which is another foreign varietal, which is Cabernet Sauvignon. That the reason we brought it is what I told before about getting into the Ribera del Duero, and then we had this plot in the Pago Valdebellón at the top of the slope, almost 850 meters above sea level, and the warmest plot. And then, because this is a longer cycle, needs more temperature to ripen, and we struggled a lot at the beginning. We only had a 96 Valdebellón, I remember, which was a warm vintage. We had a 99, we had a 2005, and we had 2009. In 15 years, we only could produce 4 vintages of Pago Valdebellón. But as from 2009, something happened that it was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, which was a cold vintage, and up to 19, which is we're making it almost, not almost, every vintage. So we saw, and there's some discussion, internal discussion about seeing that the leaves are a little bit smaller now. The skins are rougher to get the sun from Spain, from Castile. So this sort of a small adaptation of the vines that are now ripening beautifully in our place. And it is known as the best Cabernet Sauvignon in Spain. And I don't know how it would work in the US as a competitive set with your Cabernets from the US. But definitely the good thing is a varietal that everyone knows over there. And then Pago Negralada, which is a king of our Pago wines, which is 100% Tempranillo. I like to say is a pure Tempranillo from the Duero, because it is grown close to the river. Tempranillo, as you know, comes from temprano, which means early, because has a short cycle. So ideally, the best place for this Tempranillo, it would be the lower part of the valley where the colder temperatures are. And also these sandy soils and gravel stones sort of reflects the sun and helps for maturation. And at the same time, the sandy soils are not a problem because the the phreatic level, the water reserves are close to the surface. And they were struggling the first years, but now that they reach this water underneath ground level, now the vines really are quite well auto-managed themselves and auto-regulated themselves, that now I think they look very, very interesting, not with an extra load of foliage and canopy and fruit, but quite well balanced. And I have my personal bet that these are probably the vines that will last the most in Abadia Retuerta in terms of years. And the characteristics of the wine is quite pure and authentic, and showing a little bit the austerity of the Tempranillo grape. And then the PV, which is something unusual, something very original, something very limited, which is Petit Verdot, 100% Petit Verdot. This is a little bet of Pascal Delbecq that thought that this, as you know, is a blending varietal in Bordeaux because of its greenness. Especially in the sunny vintages in Bordeaux, they use it in a small percentage to bring up some nerve to the wines, and in our terroir, with our sun, with our soils, it has a different behavior and a different ripeness, and we are allowed to get something quite balanced and harmonious for this particular difficult grape. And I think Pascal has this, how do you say, sight to see that this is the place, this is the small pago that we should plant Petit Verdot, because it is also another place where there's some non-permeable horizontal underneath ground level that keeps water. This Petit Verdot genetically has the ability to grow the shoots very long, like 5 or 6 meters, which is a lot. So what we do is taking advantage of the water underneath and let the plant growth, and then let it a little bit go down to give some shade to the grapes, because the grapes are so tiny that we were having trouble because the sun hitting directly to the grapes, they were giving us the raisins. So at the end, that is probably the only place, only pago in our state where the Petit Verdot could develop in a interesting way with the management we do. We do a lot of observation and innovation. We're keeping the same technical team since the very beginning, and we feed about all what we have done over the years and all that we have learned over the years. And we will discuss this in the second part of the presentation. And this is part of the things that we show and we try to teach during our Terroir Academy project that we will discuss later. This is the heat summation in the Ribera del Duero since, well, we have the historical data since 67. New varietals and experimental wines are part of our essence. We are worried about the future of Abadia Retuerta. Maybe we are not allowed to irrigate in the future. Maybe Tempranillo is not going to work anymore, because it has been said widely now that Tempranillo is suffering because of the excess of sun and the lack of acidity. So we have planted several other varietals that we think it could add something good for Abadia Retuerta wines. We started this in 2001. We start to see this new wave coming on. And the focus is maintaining fresh fruit and acidity without compromising the ripeness and the Abadia Retuerta style. Now we have over 23 different variety planted. And one of the new varietals we can consider are Prephyloxera Tempranillo that we discovered recently. These are all the different plots and the new varietals highlighted on the right. And there's some plots that are really very small, but that's how we do microviticulture, and we do little things. We end up with between 30 and 40 wines, experimental, that help us a lot to make our portfolio wines even better, and makes ourselves even better winemakers. Also some white varietals, even some from Europe, and some Albillo Mayor as well, which is sort of a neutral, but we thought it was a tribute to the place. And this is what we are labeling now, because now that we have our Michelin star restaurant, we were producing these experimental wines, and with only a few bottles, we could monitor and see the results. But when you work these wines in a certain volume, like 1 or 2 barrels, we end up with many bottles, and we were drinking them ourselves because they were very good. But we decided to add a label to it because they had some success, like the white wine used to have, and use it exclusively for the restaurants in the hotel, to like an add-on for all the guests. And it's a fantastic, also interesting thing for the sommelier to match food and wine. Being wine one of the top ingredients in our place, and then the success of these small production wines force us to have some of these labels also in our shop, and we sell a lot in a cellar door shop, and some even online. So and it's not only varietals, but also we are trying to see the new winemaking techniques that are people, with some whole bunch, with different things. Also to use this and study this and see if this could add something to our wines as well. There's a small video that I think Kirk is going to help me showing, which summarizes a little bit in 3 minutes what I just said.
I wined since time immemorial through the lands of noble kingdoms. My waters bring life to some of the best wines in the world. I am the mightiest river in the Iberian Peninsula. But I have a soft spot. Nearly 900 years ago, I fell in love. The most beautiful abbey was built on my banks. I kissed her feet and made the vines that the monks cultivated grow. But our romance was suddenly interrupted. I could do nothing to save her. 25 years ago, something happened. The abbey, like a phoenix, was reborn from her ashes. She looked even more beautiful than the first time I set my eyes on her. I observed the centennial trees surrounding her. I took a fresh look at her beautiful, well-managed forests. Nature reigned supreme in her domains. The fruits yielded by the earth were gathered and treated as in bygone centuries. And I watered again her abundant wild fauna. It surprised me to see water birds in lagoons of recycled water. Delighted, I again moistened her vines tended by human hands and protected by sentinel birds. I noticed that very few resources were used, that nothing was wasted and much was recycled. But there was something new that I had not previously perceived in my beloved abbey, something that made her even more precious in my sight. She wanted to transcend through her wines, through her hospitality, by the way she cared about her people. And about society. I observed her, admiring her many gifts, and I wished I would never lose her again. Abadia Retuerta, crafted Spanish wines.
Very cool video, Alvaro.
Oh, gracias. Thank you, because it really brings up my emotions every time I see it with all the music and stuff. And I think it summarizes very well all the efforts and all of this trip that we've been doing over the years. Huh?
Yeah, there was.
So I didn't allow our stops as planned if some questions were arising, but maybe, I don't know, if you have anything to say, please do so.
Alvaro, I have a question. You had mentioned that you discovered some pre-phylloxera tempranillo in the vineyard. Do you use those vines for Selección Massal or for replanting, or do they go into any of the wines?
Well, actually, what we did is we identified. It is funny because this. I mean, in the ancient times, they were multiplying these vines. I don't know how to say in English, but bending the arm and building. I mean, digging it into the ground and letting another foot to grow, as from the mother vine. Huh? Well, it's funny because out of these vines that are sort of connected one to another, because that was the way they were multiplying the fields in the ancient times, we identified 6 different clones of Tempranillo, probably because the sun hit differently or they were a little bit deeper down in some areas. So at the end, there's 6 different clones in an area of, I don't know, 50 meters. Huh? So it's incredible how time develops mutations and adaptations to very specific sites. Huh? So at the end, we discovered this in 2007. We sent this material to a nursery to multiply it. And we are now being able to graft and plant some of these Tempranillo, and we are planting in several places of the property. Some of those similar to the level of altitude and soils that they've been growing for, I don't know, over 150 years, and some of them in different spots. And we are still evaluating the results. We have only a few wines made. The first one was really 2017, and it's been bottled, and we have not really released this yet. Very small production, but we are very happy with the results. The profile of the Tempranillo is a little bit more gentle, more elegant, lots of finesse, very well adapted to drought and to diseases in comparison to some other Tempranillos in the area, in the property, sorry. So I mean, it's really interesting, and even we have created the mother camp, nursery camp for this Tempranillo. We have built it in our place in a collaboration with the nursery, which makes sense that instead of having the nursery growing these clones in order to sell it in the future to some of the wineries, we're going to have it in our place. So very soon we're going to be having some certified plants of this Abadia Retuerta Tempranillo coming out of our mother camp for anyone. But at the end, this Tempranillo works very well in our place. Probably it will take some time if you plant it in Texas, okay, or in some other place. One thing is sure is that it has some strength because it's been a survival all of these years. So it has some interesting genetics that we like to explore.
Alvaro, I have a question.
Dispara.
It's about the white 2019 vintage, because a lot of people is pretty curious about the blend. Besides the Sauvignon Blanc and the Verdejo, how is going to be the blend for the 2019 and in terms of vinification?
The white wine?
Yes, Le Domaine.
Le Domaine. Well, it is, we're trying to keep a little bit the style, and we are maintaining a little bit the 80% at least of Sauvignon Blanc, which we are maintaining this 80% at least. And the rest is filled up with Verdejo, which brings a little bit of body to it. And then we use a little bit of this year of Godello, and that's it, because Riesling and Gewürztraminer we also have, and we sometimes added a little bit, but this year we decided to do it apart. So at the end, it has a slight touch of Verdejo, which also brings a little bit of body to the wine and structure. And basically, this is going to be pretty much the blend that we're going to have in the coming years, because it's really working very well. It is true that, and I saw a question arising here, that it is true that we were thinking about producing another like single vineyard white called Cuvée Palomar white. At the end, we're going to just keep it as an experimental wine. we even show this to Luis Gutierrez, because we have a great relationship, and he encouraged us to taste some of the experimental wines, even that we don't sell them still or yet. And at the end, this Godello is really fantastic, but we're gonna, for the moment, leave it as an experimental wine until we have more volume, because basically it's ridiculous, like 2,000 bottles, the most that we can make now so far. It is true that now we are working for the future in bringing back, and this is going to be real and positive now, the Cuvée Palomar red wine, and bring back this brand that was actually very famous, and now that we don't have it, all the sommeliers are asking for it. Now that we're gonna make it, we're gonna see. But basically, this wine is gonna be a blend of mostly Tempranillo, at least 50%, and then it's going to be blended with the new varietals that we feel are the best varietals today, according to the conditions, that are matching very well Tempranillo. And to name these varietals that we're very happy with the balance are Garnacha that is now beautiful, and 10 years ago it wouldn't ripen. Graciano, these two are two very common grapes in Rioja, for example. And then some Malbec, which is actually funny because it is like a native Malbec that we got from our neighbors, Vega Sicilia, it actually is one of the grapes that are allowed because Vega Sicilia, in Ribera del Duero, because Vega Sicilia has it in the blend, in a small percentage. And this especially add a lot of balance to the pH and acidity, and to the, let's say, the development, the good development of the wines in the bottle and the improvement in the bottle.
Alvaro, could you tell me a little bit about the Cuvée Palmaro? I have a 2000 vintage right here, and I'm wondering if I should drink it.
Oh, 2000. Okay. 2000. Yes. Well, Cuvée Palomar, it was an old brand of ours. When we started, in a spirit of experimenting and understanding, we started with 9 different brands or 10 different brands. As I said, we start from scratch, and now you can see that the vines behind me are thick and splendorous and beautiful, but we had to start from zero, and there were no vines. So with young vines, 70% of the volume that we were producing were younger wines, like no oak wine called Primicia, and a wine that it was broadly sold in the US called Rivola, which actually met the requirements. It was we were inventing this category that then later became Roble in Ribera, because it had a small portion of aging, Rivola. And then we had a Selección Especial, and then we have a small portion of 2 cuvées. One was Cuvée Palomar, the one that you're having, and one was Cuvée Campanario, and then the Pago wines. So at the end, we wanted to see how these different style of wines, because all of the wines were of a different style, some of them blended, some of them not blended, some of them blending some soil, some of them blending some varietals. And the case of Cuvée Palomar, it was a blend of 50-50 Tempranillo and Cabernet Sauvignon. The Tempranillo was coming from the upper part, bringing a little bit more profiting. The soils were retaining more water. There's more interaction, plant and soil, and they're more terroirist Tempranillos in a way, more aromatic, more less tannic, but more, more aromatic. and then also the more fragrant Cabernet Sauvignon from close to the river. So at the end, this was also aged in alley oak, 2028 liters, and that was the particular style of Cuvée Palomar, which actually was quite elegant, quite refined, and it was funny because there's a lot of talking about the wines about expressing terroir. And there's also a lot of talking about different winemaking techniques that are going against this expression of terroir. One of these could be the natural wines that sometimes all the volatile acidity, all the turbidiness, all the cloudiness sort of makes wines be very similar or very homogeneous, no matter the region they come from. Same thing happened in the early 2000s when Robert Parker created this tendency of not only new oak, but also high toasting level. And I had this importer in Switzerland, and when I was traveling and selling wine, said, Alvaro, you know what I like about Cuvée Palomar is because all of the Spanish wines now, including yours, most of them are very similar because they are all very oaky. The oak is very toasted and very concentrated with a lot of tannins. But Palomar at the end is much more on a pleasant style, more, I would say, Burgundian style. So that 2000, it is ready to drink. My recommendation: leave the bottle standing for the day before or a few hours, letting the sediment go a little bit down. The sediment is that part of the sediment that is not adding cloudiness to the wine. It's just some crystals and a lot of color that the wine has gone through precipitation. And if you have a decanter, it would be anything but good for the wine, but you can also use a good glass, would be enough. And then you will see that there's some development on the wine, but there is a development that is linked very well to the year that stays in the label of the vintage. So there's no over development, and there's a quite freshness linked to the wine. Hopefully, it's been long since I haven't tasted, but I have all the wines in my head, and I would be really glad if you send me some notes and some conclusions, whether if they're good or bad, but about your experience of opening that Cuvée Palomar 2000.
Thank you very much.
Vale.
Thanks, Lisa. That was a fun question.
Who is the lucky person who had the Palomar 2000?
That's me.
That was Lisa from Telluride at Vinmarket.
Okay.
Okay.
Pablo, you cannot travel now, so you'll not be able to.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have another one. About you know, we are in Pago Negralada. We are in the 2015 vintage in the US.
Yeah.
And some customers asked about the 2016 and about the potential of aging of the current vintage, the 2015. So two different questions.
2015 is a fantastic vintage of Pago Negralada. It is true that it started up very nicely, and it went through a valley of a little bit, own arrangements in the same wine, and now it's getting into the, we're in 2020. This is a wine from 2015, like 5 years. In that period of building up a very attractive bouquet and starting to really show what Pago Negralada is. So it's going to be anything into good, and really you usually measure the development of the wines or the improvement of the wines throughout the summers. And actually, it is usually when the wines change the most. And I'm really willing to taste this wine in September because I think it's going to be really promising. But I have also an eye on the 2016 because there's not much of the 15 left, unluckily. But the 2016 really, I think it is going to be the Pago Negrolada. And actually, we are planning to show this to Thomas Matthews and James Suckling and this some of these critics this summer. So we're going to get an evaluation of this wine because I think it's in the right time to be tasted.
Okay,
But
thank you, Alvaro.
not at all.
Excellent. Any other questions?
I actually have a question. If you can hear me.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering because you had mentioned that you were moving away from the use of new French oak, and when is this stylistically going to be apparent? I guess, and which vintage is this going to be apparent in?
Well, what I really said, maybe it's my English, but I really said is that the industry is moving away from the 100% new to the used oak. Ourselves, we're just moving a little bit around that tendency. So we are using still, since the very beginning, some new oak and some used oak for all of our wines, okay? Maybe the proportion of new oak has been lowered a little bit, and the proportion of maybe 3 and 4 wines for Selección Especial has grown a little bit, but only a little touch. We're maintaining our faith in terms of aging in wood, but basically trying to go a little bit according to the market. But maybe we're using pretty much the same recipe in terms of oak aging, but what we are now getting is a much more better material from the field in terms of the grape itself. So at the end, when you try to balance fruit and wine with the aging process, with the oxidative process that is obviously needed, we are now gaining more with the fruit rather than doing something extra with the wood. But basically, you can feel the wines basically less oaky because of the combination of those two terms: a little bit less new oak, a little bit more used oak, and basically, definitely, vines are getting older. Ourselves are getting more experience. Climate is now allowing us to get a better maturation. So it's a combination on multiple terms.
Thank you for that.
Well, Alvaro, you can take a sip of water now. It's okay. As long as it doesn't come from the plants. Okay, no hydric stress. Thank you. That was
we have plenty this year.
The comments that we've gotten individually, some of us in the chat box, have been extraordinary. This was a wonderful, wonderful review of what makes Abadia Retuerta so special, and your presentation skills are top notch. So thank you so much for taking us through this extraordinary journey. 90 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever the time is, it went by incredibly quickly. And thank you all very much for joining us. That was fantastic. And we look forward to enjoying the success with the information you've provided us with to take to market. So Alvaro, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for listening from me for almost 2 hours, and I hope you enjoy. And next time with a good bottle of wine, it will be better. Matthew, see what we can do.
2 bottles, 1 white and 1 red.